The grand hall of Concordia Prime shimmered with polished crystal walls, floating light orbs, and the hushed presence of over 40 species, each one older and more powerful than humanity. At the heart of the chamber stood the treaty table, an ancient ring of living stone said to pulse with the energy of past peace agreements. As Ambassador Aaron Mbeki of Earth entered, wearing a simple dark suit instead of armor or ornament, the room quieted. The leaders of the Kilax Hive, the Vortec Dominion, the Ilyari Ascendancy, and many others watched him with expressions that danced between polite smiles and veiled contempt. They had invited Earth to this summit, not because they respected humanity, but because they feared its rapid rise. In just 1 century, humans had gone from planetary isolation to building ships that outmaneuvered even the best Vortec cruisers. They had done what others thought impossible, refused dependency, unified their world, and created AI systems that even the Ilyari couldn't decrypt. Today, the Galactic Concord offered a treaty to bring an end to growing tensions across the stars, cloaked in terms of unity and peace. But between the lines, Earth was being asked to slow its development, dismantle its experimental weapons programs, and accept monitoring fleets near its core systems. As the treaty was presented, a soft chime sounded in Aaron's ear. Earth's AI diplomat, Alma, had uncovered a hidden clause buried deep in the treaty's subtext. For 200 years, Earth would be forbidden from advancing certain technologies without Concord approval. Aaron remained quiet as the other ambassadors took turns giving carefully crafted speeches, full of praise and warnings, thinly disguised threats coded in honeyed words. Some smiled too hard, others didn't bother hiding their irritation. They spoke of peace, but their tone was one of control. They mentioned unity, but meant obedience. When the final speech ended, all eyes turned to Aaron. He stood slowly, placed both hands on the cool surface of the ancient table and looked around. His voice was calm, clear. Earth declines. The words echoed across the chamber like a drop of water falling into an endless void. A few gasps were heard. The Vortec delegate's expression froze. The Ilyari chancellor blinked in disbelief. No one had ever said no to the treaty table, not in 5,000 years. Aaron stepped back from the table, and the Earth delegation began to leave, moving with quiet dignity. Reporters hovered silently in the corners, unsure whether to speak or remain still. The floating camera drones zoomed in just as the ancient Kilax sovereign, whose species remembered the galaxy when it was still forming, leaned toward her aide and whispered in a dry, cracking voice that somehow carried across the silence, "They were our last hope." And though her words were meant for no one but her kind, the phrase spread like a signal across the stars. As the doors closed behind the humans, a strange feeling settled across the hall. Not anger, not confusion, but fear. Not because Earth had declared war, but because it hadn't. Because it had simply walked away. The galaxy did not take Earth's refusal lightly. Within hours of the failed treaty, diplomatic channels flared with activity, some filled with outrage, others clouded with silent concern. In every major news stream, questions rose like dust in a storm. Was humanity bluffing? Were they preparing for war? Or worse, did they know something the rest of the galaxy didn't? Across conquered stations and embassies, humans began to vanish. One by one, Earth's ambassadors sent final messages of farewell and disappeared into the void. Human vessels left without explaining, traveling in tight, encrypted formations toward Sol. No threats were issued, no explanations given, only silence that grew heavier by the day. Some alien leaders called it a tantrum, others called it strategy. Inside the Vortec Military Council, debates grew heated. Should they strike now, while humans were isolated? Or should they wait, watch, and hope this withdrawal meant submission, in disguise? But among the Grail, a species long kept under conquered control, whispers turned into action. A hidden rebel group from the icy moons of Telvac reached out to Earth using a narrow-band signal too old for Concord to trace. Their message was short: "We are not with them, we want a true alliance." No reply came, yet the message was not ignored. Deep in the asteroid belt surrounding Earth's outer colonies, strange activity began. Mining outposts shut down without warning, supply ships vanished from tracking nets, and an entire sector went dark. Rumors surfaced of something called Project Anthracite, a code whispered by defectors and feared by analysts. No data could confirm its nature, only that it involved asteroids, energy fields, and structures too large to hide for long. Meanwhile, Earth's silence spoke louder than any declaration. The Concorde attempted several diplomatic approaches, but no human channels responded. The media tried to spin stories, calling Earth irrational or overconfident, but ordinary beings, traders, captains, workers, sensed something deeper. A silence that was not emptiness but focus, not hesitation, but preparation. One scout drone belonging to the private Nexari cartel decided to take a risk. Acting on a paid contract to find signs of human activity near the asteroid belts, it moved quietly through the shadowed corridors of space, past dust clouds and old mining trails. For hours it found nothing, just silence and drifting rock. But then it saw it. A wall of metal, stretching across the horizon like a sleeping giant. Not a ship, but a facility. Massive, dark, and alive with movement. Starships, unlike anything, in Concorde design, floated above like black arrows pulled tight in a bow. Their surfaces were smooth, shielded with a strange coating that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The drone, stunned by the size and design, began transmitting. It sent images, data spikes, emergency pings, and then, static. The transmission stopped mid-pulse. No explosion, no warning. One moment, it was broadcasting. The next, it was gone. The last image captured, a blurred shape moving impossibly, fast toward the drone, became the most viewed and most feared image in the galaxy overnight. The Concorde Intelligence Service marked the area as restricted and scrambled to contain the panic. But it was too late. The message had spread. Earth wasn't hiding. Earth was building. And whatever they were building, they didn't want to be found. The halls of the oldest empires grew tense as whispers filled their high chambers. Whispers of Earth, of silence, of power unseen. The species that once ruled without question, whose ancestors built the foundations of the galactic Concorde, were no longer calm. Behind closed doors, secret meetings took place under starlit domes and subterranean halls, where the Kalax, the Iliari, and the Vortek no longer trusted one another. Each suspected the other of provoking the humans, of breaking the fragile balance that had kept the galaxy from tipping into chaos for centuries. The Vortek, proud and aggressive, believed strength must answer silence. Their war council voted. Quickly, they would strike a human colony not to destroy it but to test Earth's response. A fleet was sent to Kepler 9c, where one of Earth's most advanced science colonies was last recorded. But when their ships arrived, they found only emptiness. No structures, no signs of retreat, not even wreckage. The surface was smooth, untouched, as if no one had ever been there. Then a transmission arrived, brief, without source, carried on an unknown frequency. The voice was clear, human, emotionless. If peace means surrender, then we choose war, in silence. That message shook the Concorde more than any weapon could. It was not a declaration, it was a promise. And it was not followed by retaliation or diplomacy, only more silence. Meanwhile, Earth remained unreachable. Its space was tightly closed, yet strangely open to those who dared cross it. One galactic trade convoy, contracted by the Nexari cartel, was allowed passage through the outer Sol system. Their journey was smooth without resistance, but every ship in the convoy reported the same unsettling experience. Shadows, silent, unregistered vessels, followed them, always out of reach, always just out of sensor range. Their computers were scanned without permission, their routes tracked without interference, and yet no damage was done. Just the feeling that they were being watched and measured. The crews returned shaken, unsure whether they had been threatened or protected. Rumors spread that Earth ships no longer moved with engines alone, that they drifted like ghosts, slipping between folds of space. The Ilyari Ascendancy's philosophers feared this meant Earth had broken through spatial limits, something only dreamed of by ancient scientists. Across the stars, tension rose like a quiet storm and old grudges began to surface. Without a clear enemy, empires turned their suspicions inward. The Kalax Hive accused the Ilyari of manipulating human development in secret. The Vortek accused the Kalax of knowing more than they revealed. Skirmishes flared in border regions, once kept peaceful by human diplomacy. For the first time in centuries, conquered patrols were recalled not to enforce peace, but to protect core systems. And then, far from the centers of power, on a forgotten moon orbiting a red dwarf star, something happened that would change everything. An AI observer, an ancient model placed by the Concord to monitor unclaimed territories, detected a fluctuation in space. At first, it assumed a ship had arrived, but what came next did not fit any profile. A black, monolith-shaped object phased into existence above the moon's surface. It made no sound, gave no signal. It simply floated, massive, still, unnatural. The AI scanned it and failed to classify it. It attempted contact and received nothing. Then, words appeared across its visual interface, etched in cold, white light. Earth remembers. No explanation followed, no demand, no warning, just a message. The monolith vanished hours later, but the message remained stored in every system connected to the observer. Within a day, the entire Concord High Council had seen the footage. It became clear, humans were not retaliating because they didn't need to. They were not silent out of fear, but out of confidence. The Watchers of the Galaxy stirred, and for the first time in 1,000 years, they felt what they had long forgotten: doubt. For 20 years, the galaxy had waited in silence, watching Earth with a mix of fear and curiosity, uncertain whether humanity had vanished into secrecy or was preparing something far beyond comprehension. Then, without warning or build-up, an official message from Earth was transmitted across all conquered channels. It contained no demands, no accusations, only an invitation. Earth proposed a summit, not in neutral space, but on the very soil of their homeworld. The request stunned the Council, for no species had ever dared host such a gathering without conquered oversight. Yet something about the message's tone, clear and calm, left no room for negotiation. The summit would be held on Earth, and all leaders were welcome, if they had the courage to come. One by one, the great empires accepted. When the delegations arrived through carefully monitored portals, what they saw silenced even the most skeptical minds. Earth had changed beyond recognition. Towering cities floated in the sky, held by anti-gravity fields powered by miniature singularity reactors. Above the clouds, massive orbital stations spun gently, forming protective rings. On the ground, clean energy flowed through glowing crystal grids, and defensive structures shimmered faintly, nearly invisible, but unmistakably powerful. There were no signs of war, no weapons on display, and no military parades. Only quiet, strength woven into every structure. Nature and technology had become one. At the summit, held within a glass chamber suspended over the Pacific Ocean, Earth's new leader, Chancellor Mira Halick, stood before the galaxy's rulers with grace and quiet fire. She spoke without raising her voice, yet every word echoed with weight. "We offered peace," she began, her eyes scanning faces that once dismissed her kind. "You offered submission. We will not kneel. We do not need to fight. We only need to walk away." She gestured, and a massive holographic display lit up the sky above, showing Earth's most recent development, dimensional drive technology. With this advancement, borders no longer mattered. Space could be folded, crossed in seconds, entire systems bypassed. No longer would humans be limited by the maps others drew. A quiet murmur passed through the room. The Ilyari, masters of temporal mathematics, looked stunned. The Kalax Hive simply went still, their antennae twitching in disbelief. Mira continued, explaining that Earth had no intention to dominate, conquer, or destroy, but also no intention to to be ruled. The conquered, she said, had long mistaken unity for control and peace for silence. Humanity would no longer play that game. There was no malice in her voice, only finality. Then, as if the moment itself had been waiting, the skies above Earth shifted. A glowing rift appeared in the atmosphere, silent, vast, and filled with swirling light. It was not a weapon, not a threat. It was a gateway larger than anything the Concord had imagined possible. Through it, glimpses of unknown stars flickered. Worlds untouched by galactic law. Realms beyond exploration. Mira looked up, then back to the gathering. Her final words, simple and steady, carried through the silence like a quiet storm. We're leaving. Not just the conquered, the galaxy. The meaning struck deep. Humanity would not retaliate, but evolve. They would not conquer, but vanish into something greater. As the gateway widened and Earth's people began preparations to step through, the delegates could only watch, uncertain whether they had witnessed a withdrawal or the beginning of a new age. In the weeks following Earth's final summit, the galaxy began to feel the weight of humanity's absence. One by one, their colonies dimmed and disappeared. Communication relays went offline, and their starships, once present along key trade routes and diplomatic corridors, simply vanished. Even Earth itself, the homeworld watched by so many for so long, flickered once in the sensors of long-range observatories, then phased out completely, leaving behind nothing but clean air and an orbit of silence. Without humanity's influence, tensions that had once been held back by their presence began to rise unchecked. Old rivalries reignited, border disputes flared into armed skirmishes, and the conquered found itself overwhelmed by conflict it had long forgotten how to handle. Pirates, sensing opportunity, turned their eyes to the remains of human infrastructure, abandoned research stations, outposts, and black market trade hubs. But those who entered these forgotten places never returned. Some ships were found floating empty, others left behind no trace at all. The more ambitious raiders began to fear what was left behind, whispering of systems still protected by hidden machines or forces no longer bound to time or space. And then, without warning, a single message arrived at Concord High Command. No traceable source, no visible transmission method. The words glowed softly in every language used by the galactic races. We will return should the stars call for justice again. The message was short, but it echoed like thunder across diplomatic networks and command halls. The galaxy had believed itself free of Earth's reach, yet the message proved otherwise. Humanity had not ended. It had simply stepped away. From that moment on, the great empires changed. They grew quieter in their threats, slower in their wars. Leaders began to speak more carefully, as if someone was listening from far beyond. Historians rewrote their records, now unsure of how to explain Earth's disappearance. Religious groups began forming across species, claiming that humanity had evolved into star beings, guardians beyond the known. Some even built temples dedicated to Earth, not in worship, but in warning. The Vortec, once loud in their challenge, now avoided conversations about Sul entirely. The Ilyari, proud of their wisdom, admitted in private councils that they had underestimated the minds of men. The Clacks remained still, their ancient queen observing the stars in quiet reflection, speaking rarely but always choosing her words with care. Generations passed and Earth became myth, then memory, and finally legend. But even legends leave traces. On a dusty planet far from any trade route, in a quiet farming village beneath pale green skies, a young alien child looked up one night and saw something unlike anything in the stars. It was not a ship, not a comet, and not a satellite. It was a shape, silent and impossible, too smooth for rock, too steady for light, hovering just long enough to be real, then slipping away into the void. The child said nothing but stared for a long time, as if something deep inside had been stirred. Across the galaxy, many claimed Earth had gone forever. Others quietly were not so sure, because every now and then, when war drums started to echo again and greed tried to raise its head, something strange would happen. A weapon would fail for no reason. A fleet would vanish without battle. A message would appear in empty space, written in a language long thought forgotten. And the words were always the same: calm, watchful, patient. Earth remembers. When Earth vanished from the maps of known space, the galaxy entered a time of confusion and fear. What began as a diplomatic mystery became a vacuum of power and stability. Humanity had not only withdrawn its ambassadors and fleets, but its very presence seemed erased, not destroyed, not defeated, simply gone. Worlds once supported by human trade found themselves isolated. Agreements once enforced by Earth's quiet authority began to unravel. The galactic conquered, long dependent on Earth's technology and influence to hold itself together, started to fracture. Meetings grew heated, old tensions reignited, and alliances once held in delicate balance crumbled. In border systems, pirate clans took advantage of the growing uncertainty. They descended upon old human stations left behind, thinking them unguarded and ripe for salvage. But what they found was nothing like abandoned ruins. One group entered a science base orbiting the moon of Orcs 7. They reported strange lights, shifting walls, and soft whispers in no known language, and then they were never heard from again. Another crew tried to hack an Earth AI databank in a deserted orbital lab. Their logs showed they had only accessed one file before the feed cut, a message that simply read, "Do not touch what you do not understand." Weeks later, their ship was found adrift in deep space with no signs of life. The Concorde tried to keep these incidents quiet, calling them accidents or technical failures, but fear moved faster than censorship. Even the most arrogant commanders began advising their crews to avoid human ruins, not out of respect but survival. In the midst of growing chaos, a message appeared, just one, delivered to the Concorde's core network without warning. It had no signal origin, no traceable entry point. The message displayed in every galactic language simultaneously, in a calm white font on a black background. "We will return should the stars call for justice again." It was not a threat. It was a promise. The council fell into silence. For centuries they had thought themselves the guardians of peace. Now, they understood. They had only been keeping order in the presence of a quiet power that had never needed to raise its voice. That realization changed everything. The Vortec Empire, once known for flexing its might with military patrols and shows of force, pulled back from its outer colonies. The Kalax, whose long memory held ancient wars and older secrets, began to watch the skies again, no longer for invasion but for return. The Ilyari, proud and brilliant, admitted among themselves that humanity had reached a level of development they could no longer predict. Their scholars rewrote star maps, not to include Earth, but to leave a blank space, unlabeled, unexplained, but respected. Among the common people of the galaxy, Earth became something else entirely. Stories spread across markets, starships, and homes. Some said humans had ascended to a higher plane of existence. Others believed they had found another galaxy, or perhaps created one of their own. Some spoke of hidden observers, silent machines left behind to keep watch, protect balance, and punish injustice. Entire belief systems began to form in distant colonies. In one, people left offerings to the stars, hoping the silent ones of Earth would bless their crops. In another, young soldiers were taught never to raise their weapons in anger, for Earth watches those who forget peace. Many dismissed these as superstition, but no one could ignore the facts. Fleets vanished when they crossed certain territories. AI systems failed when used to scan old Earth tech, and now and then, strange anomalies appeared in space. Gateways that opened and closed without warning, objects that floated for hours before disappearing, voices that spoke only when no one was listening. One of the most striking events occurred when a Concorde battleship attempted to activate a long-abandoned human satellite for data recovery. As soon as the activation command was sent, every screen on board the ship went black. A single sentence appeared: "Justice is not found in curiosity, stand down." The ship's systems restored themselves moments later, completely unharmed, but the satellite was gone. It had dematerialized from orbit without leaving a trace. From that day on, no one dared disturb human relics again. Generations passed. Some species forgot the full details. Others preserved the stories. But the legend of Earth remained. It was not a tale of war or revenge, but of quiet strength, of patience beyond understanding. It reminded the galaxy that true power was not in weapons, but in knowing when not to use them. It became a lesson taught in the highest academies and whispered in the humblest homes. Earth walked away, not because it was defeated, but because it no longer belonged in a galaxy that had forgotten balance. And yet, not everything was memory. On a far-off planet orbiting a quiet sun at the edge of known space, a small alien child stood alone beneath a clear night sky. The stars above shimmered as usual, except for one, brighter, shifting slowly, not blinking like the rest. The child tilted their head, drawn to its movement. The shape was strange, smooth and perfect, and though it made no sound, something in the child's heart stirred, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. The figure hovered only for a few moments before vanishing into the stars, leaving behind a silence that felt like a song not yet sung. The child turned back to their village, eyes wide, not afraid, but filled with wonder. Across the galaxy, others would see the same light in different skies, at different times. And, in all those quiet moments, one truth would rise again like a gentle echo from the past. Earth remembers.